All right, the next topic we're going to talk about is Affinity Photo. Steven, you've been testing this out. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I was one of the beta testers for the original Affinity Photo. For those of you who don't know Affinity Photo, it's an alternative to Photoshop. The idea is that Photoshop's been around 20, 30 years, and every improvement, every generation of upgrades on Photoshop just makes it a little bit better. But the architecture, the underlying code that creates Photoshop is still a very old architecture. So the people at Affinity Photo, they decided to, from the ground up, if we're going to use today's computers and today's technology, what can we do to make this run faster? Because I know a lot of people have mentioned that when they make changes in Lightroom, they can see those changes and it puts less stress on their computer than when they're actually using Photoshop. And that's due to that computer architecture that's a little bit more dated in Photoshop. So the idea is that Affinity Photo is a newer architecture. It's built from the ground up to be completely different. Here's what I noticed, though. If you know how to use Photoshop, there are going to be a lot of things that seem very easy in Affinity Photo, like frequency separation.
I'm looking at it right now, and I've tested a little bit before. It looks exactly like Photoshop Elements, is what I would say. It doesn't look quite like Photoshop, but Photoshop Elements, it looks really, really similar to it. So the learning curve isn't too bad, just because the interface is pretty similar.
Right. Yeah. If you know how to use Photoshop, you're going to recognize a lot of these buttons, a lot of these features. Some of the features are built in, which is really great. However, if you already know Photoshop, you probably already have Photoshop. It's probably already built into your workflow. And the thing about Photoshop is it comes with like everything else from Adobe. So you have the entire Creative Cloud. It's really nice to have that integration with all the other apps. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
what is that like? What is it like to pass photos from Lightroom to Affinity Photo and back?
It's basically you're exporting. You would have to export it as a TIFF or a PSD from Lightroom. That's the other thing. Affinity Photo will work with PSDs, so it will work. It won't completely disrupt your workflow.
Does it? Can it save as a PSD?
Yes.
Or can it just open a PSD?
As far as I know, it can say, yeah, it's saving as a PSD as well. So it's definitely very usable. What I like about it is that it's $40. You only pay it one time.
That's cool.
And so far, all the updates have been free, and they just came out with 1.5 for Mac users. So the really cool thing that I really love about Affinity Photo is the blending modes have a live view. So if anyone's kind of started experimenting with Photoshop, they know one of the things that is to really get the most out of Photoshop and layers is using the blending modes, the overlay or the screening modes and things like that. With Affinity, as you hover through them, it gives you a live preview. And that can
that's
be
cool.
Very, very, it's very, very cool to see, what effect am I going through? And you can just preview it live.
Okay, so give us a verdict here, Steven. Give it to us straight. Are you tempted to switch? Are you tempted to say, I'm done with Photoshop?
I don't, that's I don't think I can give up Photoshop. Photoshop is like, if I'm finishing a project, if I know it has to be good, I'm going to Photoshop. And because I trust Photoshop and I know Photoshop and it's everything that I need. I can't give it up. If I was just learning today and I didn't know Photoshop and I'm like, I kind of want to learn Photoshop, I might be tempted to go straight into Affinity Photo instead.
And what would be your main reasoning? That it's quicker to get started, or what's the main draw here?
It's quicker to get started, and there's less of a financial investment at the front.
Okay, yeah. Well, the financial investment is definitely true, but I mean, if you're getting the Lightroom and Photoshop together, you're already paying for Lightroom and stuff, so it's not too bad. But yeah, I mean, anytime you can get a one-time payment for something, always better, right?
Yeah, if I was already, let's say I got a Sony camera and they gave me Capture One for free with my Sony camera, and so I've already got some sort of catalog management system, I might do it. I might do it for $40, get my Photoshop right there as Affinity Photo instead of the real Photoshop.
Very cool.